Welcome to Email After Hours by SenderScore, powered by Validity.
We're your hosts. My name is Guy Hansen.
And I'm Danielle Gallant, and this is Email After Hours.
So many of our episodes are appropriately focused on topics that we know and love. We answer questions like how to create great email campaigns and what's new and exciting in the email ecosystem. And of course, we gather expert advice on industry-specific tips and tricks. But on today's episode of Email After Hours, we're talking about the people that make the magic happen. So what does it take to build a dream team? Imagine being able to gather the best marketers, the top designers, and the most passionate developers all in one place. Luckily, today's guest has accomplished just that.
So today we're going to be speaking to Philip Storey. He's the founder of Enchant, a highly successful email marketing agency in the UK. Philip initially started out as an email marketing all-rounder before making the shift to strategic leader. And building out Enchant has been probably challenging and rewarding, hopefully in equal measure. And he's going to share the lessons that he's learned along the way, and plus a few of his tips for building a truly great email marketing operation. Philip, it's so awesome having you here on Email After Hours today with myself and Danielle. Thanks for making the time to join us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Guy and Danielle. It's lovely to be here. Really excited to hopefully share some stories along the way of my career that might be able to help some of your listeners and subscribers. And yeah, I'm sure there's going to be some really interesting things that we're going to cover today.
And as we usually do, we're going to kick off with an icebreaker question. I love the name of your agency. It's called Enchant. And I want to know how you chose it, because there are two meanings that I think of with Enchant, either creating great delight and to charm someone, or casting a spell. Which were you leaning toward, or maybe both?
So this is 10 years ago, right? When I started Enchant, and I was reading this book called Enchantment a couple of years before that by Guy Kawasaki. And the whole premise of the book, or the whole purpose of that piece of work by Guy, was about kind of how to enchant people. And it just never really left me be. And I tried everything to think about a great name for an email agency. And I didn't want to kind of do that thing where you just kind of call it like something email marketing or whatever. I think to me, it really does mean something special that happens by, there's like a special outcome from doing something extraordinary. And that was kind of my way of getting to a point where I felt like I could kind of journey with that name and that word and turn it into an agency and a business. But thanks, Guy Kawasaki, for the inspo.
And we all want to be enchanted, don't we?
I think we love it. And of course, if your business is Enchant, that must make you like the email sorcerer or the email wizard. I'd love to see your business cards. But anyhow, so that kind of takes us right back to the beginning. Let's talk about your motivation for starting Enchant. What were you thinking? Had you identified a specific gap in the email market that you could fill?
Interesting question. I think at the beginning of my career, I'd spent quite a few years client side and had observed a lot of agencies doing things that I thought were a little bit strange. From a relative kind of naive perspective, I'd never worked in an agency. I was always kind of curious, I wonder why that agency are kind of doing that. And they always seem to have budgets to do fun things, and they were always taking us to cool places. And I thought, it must be fun working in an agency. And then I spent 7 or so years in ESPs. And it was just every time we lost a client, and I was working in professional services in ESPs, and I was working in creative services. And every time we lost a client, it felt like the breakup that no one wanted, but they had to leave because they needed something from a different platform. And I was never really involved in the platform side of things. I was always involved in creative excellence or strategic planning and tactical improvement. So I thought, I don't really like the fact that I'm not in control of this. And, we're doing everything right. The clients are getting taken away from us. So I thought, that kind of feels like a reason to start something of my own, but I didn't feel ready. But the turning point was me heading over to San Francisco to see my CEO of the last ESP I was at. And I was super proud of this story. So we'd just hit £1 million worth of revenue globally in the first 6 months of the year. as this isn't an Enchant story. This is obviously a story from before I started.
Bravo, either way.
And I went into the CEO's office, and he was a good friend of mine as well. And I said, I'm so excited to tell you that we've hit this goal. And he said, just take a seat. And I thought, that's just weird. So maybe I sat on his sofa, and he put some music on, and he was like, look, Philip, I don't really care how much your team makes or doesn't make, as long as you don't cost us any money. Like, just help us retain clients. And as long as you're doing that and not costing us money, you're doing the right thing. And that was the thing that made me realize that I needed to start an agency in the email space that actually could just exist on its own, that didn't try to be a tech company, that would help marketers to improve the way that the effectiveness of their email marketing and just that. So that's how it started. And I finally got the courage to do it, because people told me for about 10 years before that to do it, and I just wasn't ready. But when you know, you know.
Love it. Now, let me ask, because it was interesting listening to you talk about how agencies have that perception of fun. But I'm sure as you've learned, the reality is it's really hard work. There's blood and sweat and tears, as well as a little bit of fun. So, what are some of the key lessons that you've learned along the way?
I've learned a lot. I mean, I've been working in this space for over 20 years. I do think that the most important thing is to seek first to understand, really try to understand the situation that you're going into, especially if you're working in an agency, because you can have 10 retail clients all working in the same subsector, and they're all going to be different. Like, one thing that works in one of those organizations might work a little bit somewhere else. But if you don't challenge yourself to look again and start from the beginning, you're only going to kind of regurgitate something that you've done somewhere else to a level of success, but it will never be as good as it was. Highly unlikely anyway. So that's the first thing. I think the other thing that just springs to mind is just focusing on too many metrics. It doesn't matter if you're just thinking about optimization or reporting, just too many metrics can absolutely kill you, right?
And was there a specific turning point or moment that was crucial for Enchant's growth and success? When did you feel that Enchant had officially, made it, so to speak?
I think personally speaking, it was when I could actually work and live on my own terms. I was always the guy in my last 3 or 4 roles that would get told off for working from home too much. And where is he? I think there was a period of about 2 weeks where I just didn't turn up in the office because I had so much client work to do. And so it was well intended, but that probably was when I realized again that I kind of needed to start something of my own that was set up where I could create my own set of rules around how it would work. And when I started Enchant, I knew that I wanted the agency to be fully remote, selfishly, so that I could live and work from wherever I felt happiest. And that was one of the first principles and values that I set for the company. So we have people in the agency that work and live all over the world. And we have one person who has lived in Puerto Rico, Boston, and has now resided in Portugal for the last 4 or 5 years.
I was like, are you going to tell us that you're calling in from a yacht in the middle of the Mediterranean to do this podcast?
I was always
That's how I know I would have felt like I made it, for sure.
My go-to place was Vietnam, in a really kind of beach bum village, actually. And it was nothing like a yacht, I can assure you of that. It was very low budget, but it was perfect for me.
And I think as you finished answering that question, you actually teed us up quite nicely for the next one, because I think as any business grows and develops, there's probably, that odd time where you get to a real pivot point moment, a critical juncture where the decision you're going to take shapes where the business goes over the next few years. And I think when we were prepping for today, you talked about getting to the point where you knew that you needed to make that shift from player to coach. And were you intentional about how you made that switch? And, was it difficult for you to let go of the day-to-day stuff?
Yeah, I've got extremely high standards. And so letting go felt scary. I had to build a set of tools to be able to let go of working directly with all of our clients. I still do work directly on a lot of accounts, and I'm always spending a lot of time in calls with clients because I just love it. I like to get involved, but I also know that there's a fine line between stepping on people's toes and supporting people in the team here, right? And actually, I think clients actually really want to talk to the team anyway, more than they want to see me kind of lurking around. So, but I think for me, it was really making sure that I knew that there were going to be some kind of core values around how I would recruit and what the kind of stakes in the ground were for what it would be to be somebody that works in the agency. I knew that I needed people that would be better than me. And I kind of had this analogy of like building a dream team. I was working with a coach at the time, and we kept saying that we like to try and build dream teams, email dream teams around ambitious brands. Like building your dream team, who's going to be your best goalkeeper, who's going to be your best email designer, who's going to be the absolute best developer, deliverability specialist, account managers, consultants, all the different positions that that you've got to look for. And I set about finding the best player for every single position. And that's still, you get it right most of the time.
So has your team ever been faced with like an email oops, as we all have? And how did you set it right? In the notes, in the notes for this episode, there's in brackets, Danielle has some good examples of an email oops. And I'm spoiled for choice about like, whoops, this thing wasn't sent to the right group of people, or oops, this was unintentionally offensive, or oops, we sent you 4 of the same exact email in the same day. You know, the classics.
They are all glad. We've done all of those, by the way. I think at some point as an agency, we have definitely done to tick those 3 boxes for sure. The segmentation one is the most common one, like sending to the wrong segment. And I feel so bad for like campaign managers when they're like, oh God, I've got to tell Philip that I've made this mistake and I've got to tell the client. But the good thing is I think that I've done this too, right? We've all done it. In my first job, I sent a blank email to the whole database, and I had this really interesting Irish director that I reported to. And one day, it was near Christmas, and he did not look particularly in the greatest shape. I think he'd been at a party the night before, and I had to go to his desk and tell him that I'd done this. And I knew that I had to tell him what I was going to do about it too. And I think that's just it. Like, what are you going to do about it is what clients want to know. And I think if you're a marketer, that's what your boss is going to want to know. Like if you've made that kind of mistake. The follow-up email after that, I remember, did actually kind of, oops, sorry about the blank email, perform pretty well. So
sure. Every great idea starts with a blank sheet. I mean, anyway, I've got to say that Danielle and I learned a new term when we first met with you, when you talked about the PETA principle. So for the benefit of our audience, what is it, and how has the PETA principle played out in your career?
Okay, so the essence of the PETA principle is that you get hired to your greatest level of incompetence. So I was once probably complaining about somebody. I think the way I learned about this is I was talking to somebody in the office in a previous role, and I said, look, that person I'm just surprised they got the role, this and that and the other. Yeah. I was probably doing water cooler gossip. I was definitely talking about somebody and kind of feeling like, oh gosh, I wonder what's going on for them. And they said, Philip, everyone gets hired to their greatest level of incompetence. And it is true. It happens to all of us. You get promoted and you haven't been there before. Highly unlikely you've been to that level of before. So you're in this beautifully kind of blissfully unaware, less competent than you might like to be. I mean, you feel it, right? When you start a new role or you get promoted and there are things to learn. And also you're seen in that situation too, right? You feel more visible. And I think it's happened to me throughout my whole career because I care so much about what people think about me personally, but also the work that I do. It's affected me and actually really hindered me at times in my career where I think I've just wanted to get on with the work, but I've been very concerned about kind of being illuminated as somebody that's in their next level of, they've been promoted and hired into the next level of incompetence. And I think it's something that's so obvious when you think about it and when you're told about it, like I was, but I had kind of just no idea. I just expected everyone to be, why can't they do that? They've never done it before.
I feel like the PETA principle goes hand in hand with fake it till you make it, which is my motto.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm here somehow, so let's just pretend I know what I'm doing.
I think what we probably love and hate about the world that we operate in is that the only constant is change. And, there's always a new curveball from Gmail or Apple or new technology or new standards or new legislation. How do you keep your skills and your team's skills and knowledge up to date? What's your go-to resources for, staying on top of industry trends?
Yeah, it's really difficult, right? Because like you sometimes just bump into these issues. I get told by like a developer on the team, oh, there's like something weird is happening in Outlook or whatever it might be, and it's new. It's just like the last thing you want to know about or hear, but then who's going to fix it? And then who's going to write about it? So yeah, I think the Email Geeks channel, the Slack channel is always a great resource and a great place to find out about kind of, especially the really tricky things like around like email rendering and so on. And then I just think like all of the different industry publications and making sure that you actually check them, making sure you actually spend 15 minutes, 30 minutes a day. It has to be like a part of the way that you set yourself up each morning, I think, because things change so fast. I mean, I've just spent like 3 weeks away from the business, actually having a proper like rest. And I've come back and there's just so many different things that I've missed because I've not been doing my daily education. And I think that's the most important thing, is just making sure that you do actually do it every day and that you are always checking through all the different kind of resources and so on. I think the other thing that we've done is built like a wiki as well, like an internal wiki for things that we know are, important updates, like so that everybody here can make sure that like, everybody has actually found out about that update. And that definitely really helps too.
And of course, the very reason that you're here with us today is that you and I met at an industry event and you told us what a huge fan of email after hours you are.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I listened to it in the car all the time and I was like, oh, and then I saw you by chance. Yeah, that industry event. And then you're like, come on the show. So yeah, it was.
Absolutely. We did the deal over a glass of wine or two, I remember.
I'm convinced that guy is like omnipresent. Like there's kind of him who's just collecting guests. He's all over the place at these industry events. So we're going to start wrapping up this great conversation with a couple of closing quickfire questions. And I want to start with a fun one. And this is something that I feel like empathize with. What's the craziest customer request that you've ever received? We all have those unexpected asks, and I bet yours are pretty fascinating.
I've got some good ones. Yeah. I'd say there are two that spring to mind that are based around budgets, right? So the first one was a client that said, can we have 3 months of service for free at the end of our contract? Just because like we're a bit like delayed with some stuff. That was kind of interesting. We weren't delayed in delivering the work. They were moving platforms and needed to do some other bits. And yeah, so we said no to that. Probably the craziest though was I got a phone call once from a client who had to spend all of their marketing budget by the next day. Otherwise they weren't going to, yeah. So we all know how marketing budgets work, right? If you don't spend them, they get taken away from you, right? In the next calendar and in the next financial year. So this is exactly what this person was, the situation they were in, right? So I get this call and the question was, if I give you a number, and this number was a lot of money, it wasn't quite £1 million, but it wasn't too far away from that in terms of a budget. Do you promise to spend it wisely? And maybe not all in the first year. And so it was quite a phone call. And yeah, that's probably the craziest customer request I can remember.
I hope the still for this podcast is the face that Guy and I both made. You said, will you spend it wisely? Sure.
I was thinking of that scene in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade where he has to take that step out into the abyss and pray that something comes out underneath him to support him. So slightly more seriously, my quick fire, and we'll sort of wrap up, just a sentence or two. But has there ever been a time where you've been working with one of your customers and you come up with like a really unexpected insight that's actually significantly changed their approach to the way they're running their program?
I'd say, look, the insight, unexpected insights generally come out. I tend to find that they come from segmentation modeling. And normally it's because we find that a brand are unnecessarily over segmenting, and it's kind of like, oh, it's all well intended. This is more personalized, taking longer to build campaigns and all of the flows and automations to serve all of these different segments. But this is the right thing to do from a kind of customer experience perspective. And surely it's going to benefit performance. And it doesn't always work out like that. And that is something that still surprises me. I think that we all assume in email, I'm not saying everybody does this, but I think one of the most common pitfalls is that if you take something as far as you can take it, it will be the best. Like it will be the best for the customer experience and it'll be the best for results, right? And it just doesn't work like that. It's a weird world. The email channel is strange, right? I think we can all agree that it has its quirks. And this is definitely one of the things that's still kind of, if this was a human conversation, we often liken the way that we work with brands to like, what would a one-to-one conversation look like if it was the campaign? If you take it too granular, it doesn't always connect with people's hearts and minds. And I think, so I'd say it's not a one-off story, but I think that is the kind of the most common one.
I love that. And Philip, thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights and your expertise with us today. For listeners that are interested in connecting with you or learning more about Enchant, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Just pop by our site, enchantagency.com, or send me an email, philip@enchantagency.com. And yeah, it'll be great to chat.
And last word from my side, I think the listeners, you'll know we're always super proud of our guests. We're always looking to recruit new guests, and we're sometimes quite opportunistic about it, as you heard, in terms of how we recruited Philip for today. But seriously, if you'd like to join us for an upcoming episode, drop us a comment, ping us on LinkedIn, fill out the guest form that's linked to the show notes. And we'd love to put you on the hot seat and have a great conversation in a future email after hours. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks' time.
Bye.
Be sure to tune in next time and hit subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And don't forget to visit senderscore.com for loads more great resources to help you become a stronger sender.
To all you sleepless senders out there, thank you for joining us after hours, and see you next time.